Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs, and we're back again.
It is, and you didn't show up for the interview.
Don't say that I didn't show up.
I waited. We were worried sick.
You're so full of shit. No, I had a...
You stood up the mayor. Nice.
Who the hell is he?
Yeah.
Yes, no, I did stand you guys up. I did have a personal commitment that I needed to take care of on
court
when it was recorded on Tuesday. No, it had nothing to do with anybody that possessed a gun or a badge. So I'll let that go at that. But
we had fun without you, so there.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you, we're deep into election season here in Annapolis, and I know everybody in the rest of the state of Maryland is groaning, going, "Oh, geez, oh,
We've
man.
gotten a few emails about that.
I know.
We're sorry.
But we're moving out. We'll be talking to a couple statewide candidates.
Yep, we got a message from a candidate for comptroller. Yeah, so we're going to set that up, and that's statewide, so quit bitching, people.
We do. And boy, the food, the restaurant.
That was our really biggest episode ever.
Yes, it was.
That was huge.
It was. So if you haven't listened to that one, go take a listen to that.
See, and you were worried about us drinking during recording, and I've been a proponent of that since the very beginning. See what happens?
Yeah, right. I'll tell you. But it
alcohol
was
problem? I don't think so.
It was my idea.
It was your idea.
But hey, we're deep into Annapolis election season. If you haven't heard, we were talking with Gavin Buckley 2 weeks ago. Talked to Nevin this past week. Up next, we've got Mayor Pantelides, and then we'll be talking to Senator John Astle. We also did speak with all but one of the alder people.
Right.
The candidates for alderman, so check those out. And also, just the other night, I threw up. Well, I attended the Ward 1 debate.
Yeah, we actually didn't talk about this, so we could talk about this on air here, or on recording, whatever this is.
Right. It was sponsored by the Inner West Street Business Association. I went to that it was when we were recording this last
I had no
night.
idea who sponsored that. I just thought that was a Ward 1. I thought that was like the Civic Association.
Nope. It was the Inner West Street Business Association that put it there over at Metropolitan. Very interesting. They had 5 or 6 questions that they had come up with, and then they took questions from the audience that they all put in a box, and they just sort of drew randomly out of the box.
How long was it, the whole thing?
It was a solid hour and a half of questions, and they were limited to 2 minutes in response, which is way too short based on some of the questions that were presented.
Who moderated that?
Joe Gormley.
Joe, who's that?
He's a lawyer.
Oh.
He's a lawyer. He does a lot of the commercials for Inner West Street. He's a sponsor of that. He's a sponsor of Jimmy Davies' Upstart magazine.
Oh, gotcha. I knew that as well.
And he does a lot of he did the voiceover for the color run and whatnot. He had a pretty good moderating voice. Batting next, incumbent Joe Budge.
So Nevin was there, so I read some of Nevin's comments, and he had some interesting comments about, I think, was it Larry Clausen?
It was Larry Clausen, and Larry is really sad that he didn't respond to us for any of the alderman interviews, because boy, he came out, he threw some zingers out there, and if what he said is not, he's not a friend of the business community at all. 2 things that he said that,
but that's on purpose. He sees them as an impediment to downtown, right?
Absolutely. In 1 minute, if you look at the Ward 1 debate on there, and if my time's right, at about 20 minutes in, he says that the business owners don't do enough, and this was addressing how to solve the city's budget crisis. He says we need to get the city businesses to cough up some money to make this work, because all they pay is fees, a permit fee to build the building, and this and that. We don't get the taxes, we don't get everything else, but you're getting property taxes. So he's proposing going to the businesses, the little candy shop or the T-shirt shop or whatever, and somehow making them pay more than they already are. And they are paying property taxes via their rent.
Right. Yeah. So I think his argument is that, the argument is that the buildings would, even if they stand vacant, and some do, you're still making money off them because it doesn't matter. And that was our argument before when we said that the city didn't have a dog in the fight, because it doesn't matter if those buildings are occupied or not, because you're going to get the taxes on them anyway. But I think what he's saying is, it's not good enough that they're paying the taxes, because that's just the property.
We want more.
We want more from the businesses.
And he followed that up at about 56 minutes into the debate, I believe, when he was talking about the vacancies on Main Street. And that was another question that was posed on how do you do that. And he says, what I would do is I would say that the restaurants are charging high rent, and they're keeping them artificially inflated because of the restaurants, which some of the landlords may keep the buildings vacant, hoping that a restaurant will come in and be able to pay the high rent. Because if they get a liquor license and they're making more money than the T-shirt shop, and he says we need to lean on. He said, I don't think he said lean, but he says we need to put pressure on the building owners, the landlords, to do the right thing, to essentially force them to lower rents.
I think, well, that's dangerous. I think, that's property rights and
I mean,
what have you. And
it's overreach. What's the market will bear?
I agree with him that I agree that I guess that the rents are too high, for all my real estate experience. But that's if they're willing to let a place sit there empty rather than take what they think is less than market value, then who are we to say that they shouldn't? But on the other hand, I'm kind of thinking out loud now is that, how I feel about the business community. I think that they really are leaned on more than they should be as far as it comes to, or that they don't get the help that they need from the city. And the city is very business unfriendly, and that goes back many administrations. But on the other hand, that means that they don't have a voice at the table. Now, if they paid some sort of, business licensing fee or something, then all of a sudden they have a voice at the table. Do they have a vote in city elections at that point because they're taxpayers? Or, does it come down to fees?
Some are certainly taxpayers, but they don't have a voice at the city council. They don't have anything. And if they did, then I might reconsider this. But leaning on the businesses like this, and no. Absolutely wrong. I think it's just a terrible mistake and a terrible, very rocky road to go.
But on the other hand, is he going to find much opposition to what he said within Ward 1, who's not really been that business friendly themselves for the most part?
Probably not. But then if he's elected to council, then he's got to find 4 others that agree with him.
Yeah. Other than that, how'd it go?
It went very well. It went very well. I think Joe kind of laid down as like, hey, I'm the alderman. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I'm doing. It's all great. Larry came through as I'm the change agent. And Ellie, I thought, had a very strong position as well, as saying, hey, I was president of Ward 1 owners. I know what the residents want. I own a business here, so I know what it's like. I have a mural on my wall, which, she says, so I know what that's like. And her construction background. So I think they all have a little bit of the different things going for them. It was very good. It was very enlightening. If you live in Ward 1 and you didn't make it, give it a listen. Is
that the only aldermanic debate?
No, there's a bunch of them. And we're gonna try to go to as many of them as we can. It's just a little bit difficult. We'll get a recording. We'll do a similar. We threw it up as a crab cake.
Right.
No, there's just an introduction. Here it is.
Yeah.
And no commentary. It's just, it is what it is. And we're going to just try to do that. Pretty much it's just sort of a public service, I guess,
we're proud of our production value for what it is. So this one, you got to give us a pass on.
Yeah. Let's go talk to the guy that I didn't see.
Yeah. So it was a good talk, and you haven't heard it yet. So this is going to be the first listen for you, too. So let's do it.
When you're a community bank, you help your community however you can. Like being there for local business people, backing them up when they start up, advising them when they ask, standing by them so they can grow. Helping local businesses is one of the most important things we do at Severn Bank. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of the bank, but I'm also a proud supporter of businesses in Anne Arundel County. We never forget that here at the bank, we're a local business too. We face the same challenges and opportunities as any business, and we know how fortunate we are to have customers who stand beside us. That's why we stand beside you. If you have a business or you want to start a business, talk with us, because we're banking on you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
Of all the ways our customers can describe us, nothing means more than being their favorite.
Zachary's is the gold standard in customer service.
This is the absolute best jewelry buying experience of my life.
The annual holiday party for their customers is beyond a memorable experience.
They have the most exquisite jewelry, and the store atmosphere, it's the best around.
They listen, and there's never any pressure to buy.
We've purchased fine jewelry from different big names in the Baltimore area, but we were treated like family at Zachary's.
You'll not find a nicer group of people. They have my business for life.
Best in Annapolis is simply not enough.
Zachary's has been a part of many of my life's best memories.
After it's all said and done, there's one jewelry store that's my absolute favorite.
Zachary's. Online at zacharysjewelers.com. More than a jewelry store, a jeweler.
And we're here with Mayor Michael Pantelides. Mr. Mayor, thank you for meeting us. With us, I was going to say us, but John's not here.
Of course, Tim, it's good to be back.
Per your request, we got rid of John. So after the last time, we apologize again. John's on assignment, actually, today. Let's say that. But so it's just you and me today. We're going to chat a little bit about the mayoral race, as we've done. You're our third candidate that we're talking to, and you're tied with Gavin as our most frequent guest, if you include the mayoral forum. So both of you have been, this is your fourth time, technically. So you're an old pro on this.
I think you get used to it. It's always fun to do a different sort of interview. You know, we're used to doing radio and TV and newspaper, but I think podcast is a different way to connect with people. So, plus you guys make it fun, so it's never the same old boring questions.
We decided to do it sober this time. Well, we didn't decide, but John decided. He wrote me a nasty note. He said, no drinking. I said, look, it's 1 o'clock. It's well into my drinking time, but today we're going to play it serious. But it also occurred to me that you are the only native Annapolitan who's running.
That's true. You know, my family's been here for 3 generations. I was born and raised here. So I think I have a different perspective, seeing it from a child to an adult.
In fact, I think there's very few people, if I'm correct, on council who's actually native. This is one of those places that Maine is famous for this, that if you were born in Vermont and they brought you to Maine 3 hours later, you're not a native of Maine. You're just not a native. Whereas New York, you can be from Pakistan and you're a New Yorker after 6-7 months. I think Annapolis is the same way, that it's very inviting to outsiders, but it's got a really deep history with people like your family who've been here for absolutely forever.
I think so too. There's members on the councils whose family have been here for 5 generations. But for a lot of people, you know, you can certainly come in, be part of the community, and they accept you. You know, this is, I don't want to say a transplant town, but a lot of people come in from the outside. But no, there is that thing about being an Annapolitan. I'll tell you a joke. My dad was telling me they went to a funeral for someone.
You're starting off well.
For someone they went to high school with, and so they're talking to him, and they were like, you know, he's done this, he's done all this stuff for the community, gave money to the hospital, to churches, and everything else. And he moved here when he was 6 months old, and the preacher said he was almost one of us. He was almost an Annapolitan.
Yeah, and I think, but the city's very welcoming that way. There's not a lot of us versus them in the city. I think, you know, we talked with Nevin about the 3 Annapolises, which is white, black, and Latino, and that is the result of decades and of strife on one side, and then of course the Latinos being relatively newcomers, and that brings new challenges. Public housing brings new challenges or unique challenges to the city that many other cities don't have to deal with, especially cities this size. I mean, I think it's been said, and I don't know if this is correct, so this is just one of those constructs that people put together, but Annapolis has more public housing per capita than any other city in the country. And
that's true. It's any other state capital.
Yeah.
So the capital did an expose. There's more per city, but for state capitals, we have the most.
And that's a lot to balance. So when you're mayor of a city like this, which is not large, and we're a bedroom community to either Baltimore or DC, but we, and I said this before, is every city thinks they're unique, but we really are for a lot of reasons. And I say this all the time, and I mean it. This is the capital of the richest state in the richest country in the history of the world. That is a lot, and you hit the majors right off the bat. You swung and hit, and you're mayor of that.
Well, I did, but it was a lot of hard work to get here. I didn't just run the last election, happen to win. I planned it out for 5 years. So I'd managed a former mayoral candidate, Dave Cordell's race. I'd managed a state senate race, and all the jobs I had were pretty much politically involved, whether it was selling political advertising for the Baltimore Sun, working with Vocus, showing Fortune 1000 corporations how to manage their PACs, political action committees, grassroots advocacy tracking bills. So I'd always been involved in politics for a while. But you're right, it was my first race I had won for, and I won.
So how is your campaigning different now than then? I mean, obviously, the education you've gotten in the last 4 years, I mean, I think you were probably somewhat surprised you won, and because, I mean, this is a democratic city. You had people who were twice your age. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was not in your favor. So, I mean, just if you're looking at the numbers, it was a safe bet to say, well, we're going to go with the status quo, and you were a disruptor.
That's true. I was a candidate of change, and I think I still am.
So you had to. But between then and now, you've had your share of missteps as anyone would, or the learning on the job. But what perspective do you have now that you didn't have 4 years ago?
Well, I think I have a unique perspective. Just involved in the community. You think about it. I was president of my community association. I've run a mayor's race, and then I ran myself and was mayor. So I think I've seen how you work with the council, how you get things done in a bipartisan fashion, and how you really bring people together and build on partnerships. We've seen it with Governor Hogan. We got $1 million for flood mitigation. We lobbied the county executive for transportation money. We got $750,000 more than we had before. And it wasn't complaining saying, I'm broke, give me money. It's saying, look, half of our bus shelters are in the county. 42% of our bus routes are in Anne Arundel County. So we want some money to compensate for that. I've learned how to work with different things. I mean, when you're mayor, you're working with superintendents, you're working with presidents of colleges, you're working with community association churches. So kind of have a broad-based experience meeting different people, which is what I like. I mean, I'm a people person. I was in sales beforehand, so I've really enjoyed the job. And I've got to see how all the departments work, how city government works, and it's been a fascinating experience.
Now, has that changed the way you're going to campaign? I mean, the first way you were a newcomer, you were not door knocking, you were building a name for yourself. Now everyone knows who you are.
Sure.
I mean, you're the incumbent, and there's a lot of advantages that come with that, and there's a lot of disadvantages that come with being an incumbent.
You're right, it's a double-edged sword. I think the basics of campaigning remains the same. You have to knock on doors, talk with people, raise money, put up signs, advertise, go to debates, things like that. But, there's different perspectives, how you connect with people, what issues really resonate with people in different communities. So once you've been out there, you understand, jobs is the important thing to one community, where parking may be another one, or the environment, or traffic. So really being able to connect with different groups on what their most important issue is. It's kind of a unique perspective.
Well, and that's all, with the wards that we have, there is a lot of different needs that the wards, each particular ward has. For example, parking is a big issue for Ward 1 in so much as they think parking's not enforced. Whereas someone from Ward 5 or 7 will say there's no parking downtown. One of them's wrong, but you can't please everybody, and that's a difficult position to be in, where you're trying to please everyone in a city where the wards are so different, and they are very different.
I think it's one of the most fascinating things is how two people can view the same situation, exactly what you said. I'll talk to people downtown, business owners, and they say, your parking people give tickets all day. They're the most efficient form of city government we have. They say they do more than anyone else. They're writing tickets. Then you'll talk to residents and say, your parking people do absolutely nothing. We've never seen them. They've never written the ticket. So two people with completely diametrically opposing views on the same subject.
How do you think SP Plus is doing so far?
I think they're doing better. I tell everyone, because parking comes up all the time, I think we've gone in the right direction. Being able to pay with your cell phone, the circulator being free, but more than being free again, now having an app where you can find it in real time. You can look on there and say, do I want to wait 15 minutes? You can track it just like you would track an Uber coming. You can see it on your phone coming through. We're getting a wayfinding program underway. We've already started that. So I think there's more and more things we're doing. We're also thinking outside of the box. I mean, what we allow to happen in the city, and I sponsor legislation to allow people to park on private lots is incredible. I mean, that's going to open up probably 100 spots downtown. The Board of Education, I talked with the superintendent, they're going to be doing that as well, which is, that Green Street lot sits empty. That's a gold mine. They're not mining for gold. So now they're going to lease it out to businesses and other people, opening up more spots for people. So I think we've tried to do things differently, be innovative in how we do things, and I think it's paid off. It's challenges always. So two things on parking I tell everyone, because a lot of people don't know. If you're a city resident, you can go down and get little blue tickets that give you 2 free hours of parking. And half the city doesn't know about that. Encourage people to come down. The other thing is if you work downtown, you can park in the Park Place garage for $2 all day and take the circulator. So we're trying to find different ways to get some of the people that work downtown out of Hillman, off of the street, but still give them reliable places to park at a very affordable price.
So going back to, you were mentioning working with city council. You've had an acrimonious relationship with some city council, which is not different than Josh did or Ellen did for the most part, especially Ellen, and they were of the same party for the most part. And some people would say that is by design, and that's the way it should be. So looking at the elections that are coming up, there are a lot of candidates, aldermanic candidates that we didn't expect to see and that we haven't in the last few elections, and which I find encouraging, frankly. But you could look at a pretty big shakeup on city council. You can believe some of the predictions. By some of the predictions, I mean John. But how do you see the relationship with the mayor working with city council? What have you learned in the last few years? Yeah,
I think we've done a good job. The first thing I learned is you have to work in a bipartisan fashion. And every time I talk to people, I always give this statistic. Because I'm on the Municipal League, the Legislative Committee. We lobby for all the cities in Maryland. There's 157 cities in Maryland. And out of that, only 4 of them have partisan elections. That means only in 4 cities, Annapolis, Frederick, Baltimore, and I believe Hagerstown, you run as a Democrat-Republican. Because there's no Democrat-Republican way to put out a fire or fix a pothole. So
but it still comes up.
It comes up, sure.
It does. I mean, the first act that council had, and there was some wide-eyed innocence with it when they tried to strip the position of some power, was no, we were going to do this anyway. And maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but some people thought that was motivated by party.
I think that definitely was, and we've seen attempts to strip powers even this last budget. But going back to the bipartisanship, my first budget was passed 8-1, then 7-2. All the things I've got done, I know we'll talk about it later, Forest Conservation Act, adequate public facilities, even the golf course and all these controversial issues people say, these were all done in a bipartisan fashion. I'm one of 9 votes, and you need 5 votes to get anything done. But going back to the original question, which was talking about how we work with the council, they've tried to strip powers away. You saw them try to do it with the city attorney, with the auditor. They wanted to create 2 positions that would only answer to the council, which is directly stripping away the executive's authority. But I don't think it's me or so much partisan. I think it's the natural checks and balances. I'm sure county executive, the governor, every city across the state, council and mayors always clash on certain issues. It's how it should be. It's a check and balance between the two.
Well, being an incumbent, like we said, comes with advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is that you're coming in, and the next mayor will too, whether it's you or someone else, or let's say 4 years after that, is that any program started on the previous administration, if it's a success, you can tout that as a success. If it's a failure, you still own it. So you own either one of those. Yeah. So what are the initiatives you see moving forward that you started within your administration that you think are wildly successful, and which were ones that you think could have gone better than they did?
Sure, that's a great question. So a couple of things we highlighted were things that had started under previous administrations but never got completed. So one, I'll talk about the Annapolis Renewable Energy Park. It tried under Ellen Moyer, tried under Josh Cohen, and it was basically completely dead by the time I took office. Then I came in there and said, look, we got to make this project happen, right? The old thing of we're just going to raise taxes over and over again, or we're just going to cut spending doesn't work. So on the energy park, we worked with the private developer, no city money. We're putting up 50,000 solar panels on the city's landfill. It's going to make the city $4 million over the next 20 years, creating green jobs, green energy. It's innovative. I had to bring that project back to life. Some of the things that were started before me that I saw through were the water treatment plant, the bulkhead. But I'd say I would still take credit for some of them because someone had to manage it. And just give you an example on the bulkhead. That project that we did downtown, and for those people listening that may not know, the concrete around the inner part of City Dock.
Right at Eagle Alley.
Eagle Alley. We built it on schedule and $1 million under budget. So even though previous mayors may have started the RFP, someone had to make sure it was managed and got done properly. And that happened under my watch.
So what are the projects that you think that you would wish would have handled a little bit better that did not go the way that you wanted it to go?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. There's not really one big glaring thing that I think hasn't been implemented well in the city. There's obviously little things we could have done differently throughout the years. We thought about this before we came in there. But legislatively, there's no real big regrets that I have.
So we got to talk about the mayoral curse, which is the market house. So that was a surprising issue that came up. That was not expected. I think we had said in the podcast right after that we were surprised it even came up because it was one of those things that has been the bane of the Moyer administration. It was the bane of the Cohen administration. It's just one of those things that just you inherit and it just doesn't get better. And I think we were surprised, most people were surprised to see that that the RFPs came through and that City Council had punted. If you had to work without City Council, if you had the power to change everything, what would you do with the market house?
That's a great question. But let me go back a little bit at the beginning because you're right. The market house has always been an issue. I think, looking back, if you ever read the book Gone to Market by Ginger Doyle, she talks about...
It's a great book.
Yeah, 300-year history. The market house has been in, 4 different locations, and it's always been the same way it is now. And frankly, I think it'll be that way in the future. Government getting involved in a private business is steep. But I'm the only mayor in the last 15 years to have the market house open every day. I think they've made it better. I think, bringing back fried chicken, bringing back oysters, that's what it was like when I was growing up. And that's really my plan. I want to make it what it was. But I think you're right. We were surprised that this RFP process came up, which I think had a lot of flaws to it. My ideal situation would be to have a traditional market the way we had growing up, going forward and have people really bring back the life that used to be in there, the place that people wanted to go to. I think all 3 of the proposals that are on the table now are better than what we have. I just don't think they met the qualifications of a market. I think when I talk to people, particularly in Ward 1, they say, you asked for a market house and you got 3 restaurants with a liquor license that came back as their proposal. And I think one of the things I push for is waiting till the next election, right? And not just that I want to punt it or kick it down the road, but I don't believe they've truly met the qualifications of an RFP. And more than that, I also think we have to...
The problem with that, though, but it went through 2 committee meetings, and their argument was that it should have been brought up during those meetings that the RFP requirements weren't made. And I think that was the frustration that people had, is that we had 3 good plans. I mean, you could talk about the merits of any of them. And to me, there were some positives and some negatives. And personally, I don't know if you can recreate what we had before, because it was kind of an organic formation.
Right.
But I think that was the frustration that I heard the most, was when in council it was said, they didn't meet the requirements. They said, well, it went through 2 committee meetings, so it should have been brought up at that point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I think if you look at it, this has come up with, I think 2, if not all 3 of the people about the liquor license, right? And we said, what happens if you don't get the liquor license? They said, well, it doesn't work out. So I said, let's role play that. You get a 10-year lease to run the market house. A year later, the liquor board tells you no, what do? They're both like, we walk away. Then the market house just closes. So my whole thing is, I don't think the market house should have a liquor license, but if it does, is that the end of the world? No, I think it'll be fine, and I'll respect whatever the liquor board does. But I think you need to have a plan. Like, we can't afford to get this wrong again. It goes on a month-to-month lease. I have legislation to give the current tenant another year or 6 months, but I think we can address the problems with the new council, because you also got to think about it from their point of view. Look, before I was elected mayor, 10 days before my election, they passed a collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Gave all the city employees a 10% increase. I had to deal with and pay with. And there was good things in there, like shoring up the pension fund. But for a brand new mayor and council to say, oh, by the way, we just signed the 10-year lease, I don't think it's fair. And I think there's a lot of flaws in the RFP. But, what do I want to see happen? Look, I think we can let the current vendor stay in there for the time being. We can work with them more and more about what we want to see in there. Both of them said we'll have a market week once a week or a market once a month. It's supposed to be a market house every day.
Right.
And so I think that's a challenge. But, the traditional model of, is it all going to be, vegetables and fresh fruit? No, that market doesn't work. But I will say I like what they said about, even in the new market proposal about having it like an Annapolis seafood market. Fish you can get to go, or fish they can cook up for you, or having vegetables to go, or vegetables they'll make. Like, there was a lot of good things in each concept. And I think people shouldn't look at it as a failure if it doesn't get voted on. We should look at it from the point of view as it brought a lot of new ideas to the forefront. So I see it as a positive.
So you mentioned just now, you were talking about the collective bargaining that
Sure.
went through right before you took office, and that put another financial strain on the city that was already reeling from the recession. I think we can agree that Josh really inherited a mess on a lot of respects because of the recession, and then maybe some issues with the way that the city managed money before. And now the taxes are, the city only makes its money through 2 revenue streams, which are taxes and fees, right? There's nothing I'm missing. So you can raise fees, and you can either raise taxes or hope the property values go up, in which case that you gain revenues. If the property values don't go up or they fall, you got to raise taxes. But someone along the line is going to have to raise taxes, right?
I don't know. I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because I think there's different ways to go about it, which is think about growing the tax base. And when I say that, I don't mean allowing massive developments. I mean simply you can find ways to bring in more money. So take the energy park. That's an old city landfill, is making us $4 million. We got $1 million, as I said, from Governor Hogan for flood mitigation. We got more money for our Safe Streets program for our police department. We got a federal grant to pay for 12 new firefighters. We got money from Anne Arundel County. So I think there's innovative ways we can do things. And
but the problem with pushing back a little bit on the firefighters, because this is the issue I see, is when you have these grants for firefighters or police officers, those grants are for that particular year. So once you hire them, then you got to pay for the years afterwards, and if you don't get those grants, right?
That's true. That is a fair thing. But I think being the capital city, we're in a good position. But also seeing redevelopment. So look at things that have happened. The old Stevens building sat vacant. It's now Mission Barbecue. The old Fawcett's building was vacant. It's under construction.
I thought it was really cool they kept the name Stevens up there.
I
thought that was respectful to the history, and I think when you talk about respect, that was really a cool move to leave the Stevens sign up.
Very much so.
Anyway.
I think it was great. Now, then I was talking about the Pocket Park. You've seen the old Maith building. There's going to be new people going in there. So kind of redeveloping properties in, a smart growth way. So I think you can grow it that way. And I think you can also talk about cutting some of the, not just the waste from government, but how we do things.
A couple things on that.
Sure.
Here's a hypothetical. Let's say that you didn't have to pass your budget through council. How would it be different than it is now?
I think you probably see a smaller staff on the city front. I think, we have a lot of employees in city government, and it's always hard whenever people say that. I've told people the hardest thing in government is letting someone go.
Well, and I'll say this too, and I've said this many times, is that I don't want to see anyone out of work. I don't. Yeah. But I've had to let people go before because we just couldn't afford that, or, I've been let go. It's just that that is part of business, and I know as a government, it's not a jobs program, but I think that is one of the criticisms I hear often, and it may or may not be true, that we have a bloated bureaucracy for a city our size. Now, that's because we have our own police department, our own transportation department, our own fire department. If you took those out, then maybe we would be comparable with the other cities. So
maybe, but I mean, the only increases you've seen really is we hired 10 new police officers. It wasn't with grant money in my last budget. The 12 new firefighters were with the grant. So you've seen public safety increase, but every other department in city government, you really haven't seen a growth. And it's like I said, we got to do partnerships. It doesn't always mean someone getting laid off, but maybe it's the county doing something. And it's a give and take. For example, we have that great partnership where we're patrolling Williams Creek. No one lost their job. We're doing it. We got more money for transportation. No one lost their job. We got more money. But I think there are times where the city government can grow too much, because once you get something new, we shrunk. There was a Department of Neighborhood and Environmental Programs, and out of the 157 cities in Maryland, we're the only one that had that. And I merged that with planning and zoning to make the process more efficient, because people were complaining about, God, it takes forever to get a permit. And we put in legislation to change it. If you have projects under $500, you don't need a permit, right? And then some of it's now based on you. So if you were redoing all your floors, you might not need a permit unless it's like plumbing or electric. So really make it so, do we need this many people? I don't think anybody's been laid off on that front if we're making it easier. Because I was like, wait, if you spend $250 for change a window, you got to get a permit? They're like, yeah. I'm like, this is government micromanaging. So I think there's ways we can make it better. So that would probably be the one thing you would see in my budget.
Is just cutting back the waste that you have within city government. Mm-hmm. So going to planning and zoning, people tear their hair out when it comes to when they're business or if they are a private citizen. That is a bureaucracy that maybe is, I've heard the same thing about the county, but it does take a long time to open up a business. Yeah. How can we streamline that process once and for all?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that we've done, as I mentioned in the past, a number of things we can continue to do. One of them is, I said, we merge the two departments. So instead of, you getting something and planning and zoning, and then it sits in inspection and permits and public works, they're now working together. We have Hollis Minor, she's great for economic development, getting an expediter in there to help push through some of these projects. And the biggest thing is making it more predictable of a timeline. That's the one thing I hear from business owners. They just want to know what they have to do and when to expect it. And also a little bit more accountability there in terms of when people are getting things done. I have a good job and I'll take, some flack for it, but I don't want to have to call every time or have someone come to my open the door to get something through. It should work organically on its own.
That goes to development. And I was looking at the ad. All four candidates have a really robust Facebook presence when it comes to advertising. You all have some great ads, all four of you. Yeah. And what I've heard was development is what comes up in every campaign. And we kind of have a role reversal here, is that we have the Democratic candidate, Senator Astle. I was looking at his ad this morning where he says, I'm going to stop development. He's a Democrat. You're a Republican saying that, at this point saying, I'm going to control development. And we have Gavin who is saying, I want to move development through for a tax base. So right now, when we're talking about party, any paradigms you have are kind of out the window, because like you said, at this level, it's unique to the city. It goes beyond party. And the election last time was centered around Compromise Street. That was the big flashpoint. Not to say that's the reason you won. I'm saying, but that was the impetus that was the wedge issue and what have you. So we still have Crystal Springs. They were sent back to the drawing board the other day. So they've got to resubmit. So they're getting their heads together to figure out what they're going to do. Compromise Street is under construction right now. We have the construction that's very contentious in Eastport. I'm of the mind that, I live along Forest Drive. As long as traffic doesn't get bad, as long as the environment's okay and the schools aren't crowded, I'm fine. People have a right to develop. So as long as those things are good, I'm good. But I'm not. I don't live in the city. The people in Eastport, I thought that that was infill development, that it should be approved. And I got spanked by people who live in Eastport saying, you don't live here and you don't know what it's like. And, they have a point, I guess. But at some point, you need to expand the tax base. So where do you stand on development in general, and where do you stand specifically on the Eastport development in Crystal Spring.
Sure. So there was a lot in there, so let me try to get through all this.
I love the way my voice sounds in headsets, so I'll just keep blathering on and on.
So the first thing is, I think you're right. I think the last election was about many things, but the two main things were what happened to the old Fawcett's building in Crystal Spring. And I was the candidate that stood up and said, look, if I'm elected, these two projects will not be built. We got to protect our quality of life. And the day I got elected, the person that was doing the Fawcett's building pulled out. And rather than have nothing happen, we're having something great happen. You know, the Boston Whaler dealership's going in there, North Sale, they're going to have a restaurant. The whole community came together to help that. So we took something that was vacant, we got community input, we're making it something great. On Crystal Spring, look, I tell people, I get to ask this question 100 times, 100 different ways. If I wasn't elected mayor, Crystal Spring would be built. And that's just not an opinion, that's a fact. I took a stand against it, and to date, Crystal Spring hasn't been built, and it never will be. I mean, if you think about it, the original Crystal Spring plan, townhouses, an inn, commercial the size of the Harbor Center, the senior living facility, all the other aspects of it are gone. They packed up their bags and went back to Connecticut. So Crystal Spring, as we know it, is dead. That will never be built, period. Now, what do we have? We have 170 acres of land where something's going to go. Right? And you have people out there saying, you know, Mr. Mayor, I actually had someone say this to me. I said, well, what do you think should go there? They said, absolutely nothing. I said, you really think you can tell somebody they can't put it up? They go, if you put up one house, you're a liar and you broke your word. I'm like, come on. I never said that. So people just say stuff. But look, you have a Lutheran facility that's coming in there, which I frankly think is still too big. I mean, the environmental impact, the trees are cutting down, it's far too much. Will something go there eventually on 170 acres? Of course. But I'm the only one that's proven with a track record that I'll stand up to big development that's out of control. Number one. Number two, on that property, I think they have to scale it back a lot. You know, something will go, but, you know, people keep trying to play this game of, well, let's just see how far we can push, and they're really waiting until after the election. Because you got to think about it like this. Developers are against me because I've taken a stand, right? And I know we mentioned this in the forum. They're already running ads against me, the people from the Eastport Shopping Center, on the radio. There's a lot of money that
they're very aggressive.
Right. There is a lot of money. When I say a lot of money, I don't think people realize how much money they're spending to beat me. And this is reported and not reported. Just look at Assel's campaign finance report. A third of his money came from other candidates. You know, you had the speaker, you had President Miller, you had all these senators come in there. The last election I ran, Martin O'Malley's, I think it was his Packers, Super PAC was given money, right? You got the Eastport Shopping Center, you got the Crystal Springs people. They're going to dump probably close to $1 million to beat me. Why? Because I'm the one candidate with a record that'll push back against out-of-control development. They don't want me in there. So they're all hedging their bets on this election. So let me call out John real quick on this. The person who was the bank, the lawyer, and one of the developers for Crystal Spring had a $500 a head fundraiser for John Astle. Now think about that for a second. They had a $500 head. That same person had a $1,000 head fundraiser for Josh Cohen. Why? They want to beat my brains in. They want me gone and destroyed because they know once I'm gone, they can go back and do what they want. So for John to sit here and say he's going to stop all development, give me a break. Give me a break. He's not going to do that.
It's not all development that you're opposed to, or
Sure.
Is it?
No. Look, I think I have a record of smart development. We've had over 400 new or expanding businesses in this city. You know, you've seen new things go up. Right across the street, the Lighthouse Bistro went up. You know, we talked about Mission Barbecue. We talked about Fawcett's. We've talked about the old Mafe building getting filled. And we've had a number of good, healthy development projects, even on Main Street. You know, the Iron Rooster, the Lucky Knot, Three Sisters. There's lots of vibrancy coming into our downtown, which is what I want and what we have to do more of. And so I think we're going to keep building upon that. But no, I've taken stances, and you asked earlier about legacy. There's things you can do now that can change from mayor to mayor. I've tried to leave a legacy about stopping overdevelopment in the future. And I'll give you two examples. One's the Adequate Public Facilities Act. You know, before I was elected mayor, it's kind of the Wild West. If schools were overcrowded, like Tyler Heights at 140%, you could build whatever you want whenever you wanted. Schools be damned. Which kind of hurt me. You know, my dad's first job was teaching history. My mom taught Spanish all here in Annapolis. You know, education is important to me personally. So going to that, now if schools are over capacity, we can shut down development. Is it perfect? No. Could it be stronger? Absolutely. But we've taken that first step. We've also changed the way we pass the.
Well, because the developers were really upset by that. Because I think that was Alderman Lippman proposed, and they really attacked, and he was attacked by both, I think, or that was the Forest Conservation.
Yeah, we'll get to that one right now. Yeah, the Forest Conservation Act. I mean, you know, passing no net loss, and you know, Alderman Lippman and a couple other council members went through and sat through a lot of the committee meetings. I voted for them. I think I sponsored both of them. But, take no net loss. You used to be able to chop down, I believe it was 4 trees and replant 1. Now it's on a 1-to-1 basis. And so those things are good. Those things are helping. For traffic, we lowered the count. Instead of 400 cars generating a traffic study, it's 250. And we're actually doing real traffic studies. This is the fascinating thing. I'm a big data guy. I came from a software company. I love numbers and data. You hear me say it all the time. You never knew what a traffic count was. Basically, people would say, oh, they did it in the summer, everyone's gone. Or they do it in the winter when no one's driving. Or Quiet Waters was closed. Anne Arundel County right now is installing cameras all along Forest Drive. Not speed cameras or red light, but to tell us every day how many cars are going through. So we can get a real-time estimate on what's going to happen. And you'll see in the next few weeks, if not month, a rollout that the county executive and I have on planning. We can talk about later the partnership, but how do our 2 jurisdictions plan together? Eventually there's going to be more development among the peninsula, and eventually we're going to get to a point where we can't allow any more mega developments to happen. I think we're already there, frankly. So we have to have smart growth, infill growth in that corridor. And I think I've proven with the legislation I've done and the stances I've taken against big development that if that's your issue, I'm your candidate.
All right, so one of the things I want to talk about was a letter that was in the paper probably about 2 months ago. I think it was from Mayor Moyer.
Yep.
Who watches things very carefully. She's got a temper, you've got a temper. And they were talking about the rumor, or she presented a rumor, if I recall this correctly, and if I don't, I apologize, about the police department merging and the fire departments merging with the county. Yeah. That there was a secret plan to merge, and you very forcefully came out and said that's not happening, and I don't know where this came from.
Yeah, so look, this comes up, first of all, I have no plan to merge the police and fire department. I said it before I was elected. I've said it as mayor. I've said it during the campaign too. And this is an issue that's come up every single year. I think if you look back the last 4 or 5 mayor races, it always comes up. But the biggest thing in today's day and age is the false narrative that people paint. You can just throw a grenade and there's no real accountability for it. And I'll just give you a few examples on that. One, people say things without ever having to retract a statement. So we did our first forum with you and John, and I remember Senator Assel talked about the bond ratings, and he said, our bond ratings are terrible. Under this mayor, they've gone down. And I corrected him. I said, actually, our bond ratings have gone up, and they've gone up twice. But if I wasn't there to call them out, people would believe that. We had Trudy McFall send in a letter to the editor saying, there was no women in my administration, and I hadn't appointed any females to the Housing Authority. I'd actually appointed 2 women to the Housing Authority, which were confirmed, and there's more women than men on that commission. I have a woman that's in charge of economic development that happened under me. The first female harbor master in 300 years was under me. My chief of staff, my head of communications, the current city attorney.
She should put that on LinkedIn. Just going, I'm the first harbor master in 300 years.
Female, right? No,
that would look great.
Yeah, but I mean, city attorney, IT. So there's tons of women throughout my administration. The chair of my campaign is a woman. But people just say things and there's never accountability. It's just so frustrating to deal with.
But, there is, to a great extent, being in a small town, this is where there's an advantage to that, is that I don't think you've let many of those go by unanswered, in the Capitol.
Sure.
Or, although I was just going off on the commenters on the Capitol. I always say I'm not going to read the comments that I do. And I was reading them as you guys came in today, and I was just seething in general. But, the Capitol, you have the podcast, you have Facebook. These are ways that you can address it. And there's a lot of ways to monitor what people in town are saying. The Eastport Forum, for example, on Facebook is a perfect way to get the temperature of what people are fired up. Those are all the mouthiest people in town. Yeah.
It's great. It's my guilty pleasure. I love reading it. I can't help myself.
Whenever I get that little planet with a little red thing, and I'm just like, someone posts on the Eastport Forum, boom, I'm right there. And I'll get into it a little bit. I like a good debate, and these are things that affect everybody. And it's funny because you'll see people who are bleeding heart liberal or are hardened conservatives, and they're neighbors, and they kind of go at it, and then they'll do something nice and it'll be peaceable. But it's a great microcosm of the country. You can just see that people go at it, but then afterwards everyone's okay. But it's a great way to see what's going on with the city.
It really is.
So you do really have a lot of ways to see what people are talking about and kind of reach out. So looking kind of long term for the city, assuming you win a second term, what capital projects are at the top of your list do you think needs to get done?
I think there's a couple of things. The most immediate one, which is in the budget for this year, is Main Street, and they're going to start construction the beginning of early next year. I think after that, the Hillman Garage is something we have to finalize and complete. And then third after that is, just the regular roads and sidewalks that are going to take place and happen. We timed it all out. I know people have criticized before, but we looked at the downtown area. I said, okay, first we have to do the bulkhead around Eagle Alley, which, by the way, if you looked at it, concrete was falling into the ground. There was just metal rebar. So we built that on schedule, $1 million under budget. Then Main Street, then the Hillman Garage. Somebody said, why didn't you do it all at once? I said, we would have killed the downtown. If you would have done all three. So those are some of the big projects. The water plant's underway to get completed. The energy park's moving on schedule. So those are some of the big ones.
What about I think this was a federal grant. Is that the water mitigation or the tidal mitigation for downtown too?
Yeah, so that's a whole other subject, which we can get into, which is how do we address sea level rise and climate change, right? And when I came into office, people were working on it, but there wasn't a solid plan.
By the way, it's interesting, and I told you before this, I'm not affiliated, so I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but it's funny when you see the Republican platform nationally, when they're very aggressive, pushing back against climate change. But if you are a Republican in Florida or South Carolina or Maryland who live on the coast, that's kind of like, well, okay, there might be something to it.
Well, I think it's also changed. They had a vote in the Senate. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was how many people believe climate change is real? And every Republican voted for it but one. And then they said, how many of you believe it's man-made? And only half of them voted for it. So we've kind of got halfway that people believe in it. We haven't got the other way.
That's our begrudging. We'll compromise. We'll just agree it's happening and everyone else shut up after that.
But no, we're doing good things. So the $1 million grant is helping us study how we're going to fix it. We also applied for a $3 million grant. Look, I went door to door talking with business owners saying, how does this affect you personally? How much money have you
I was talking to Ryan down at Pips. He said you came in and talked to him.
Yeah. And so we've talked to him. So we're applying for that. We're working with the Naval Academy. So it's a big initiative of mine, and I think it's a legacy one that we may not even complete during term 2. But the great thing about it, I tell everyone, when you look at challenges facing city government, most of them are monetary, meaning if I got $100 million, I could fix every street and sidewalk. If I had another $100 million, I could do every environmental project. The hardest issues are where money don't come into effect, like heroin and that epidemic. And how do you address things that are more than just financial, right? And so as mayor, we've been going through and trying to find innovative ways to fix some of these problems.
Looking at public housing. Sure. So again, we talked about public housing as a huge element to the city. Those families who live in public housing go back for generations. And it was really interesting, John, when he was doing the aldermanic interviews, and he interviewed Rhonda Pindell-Charles, and it was he actually recorded it just getting a level, and she was talking about the history of the black community in town, which was fascinating. It was just really interesting. She was talking about the employment back in the 40s and 50s, where people worked and what happened and how the public housing grew. And it was really interesting conversation. And it reminded me that the people who live in public housing have been here for generations. And a lot of them come from very prominent African-American families who lived here at a time, some of whom were affluent at that time. But we have an issue with public housing with crime, which is probably endemic to most public housing. If you look in Baltimore, you look in D.C., it's the same. We have an issue with drugs. We have an issue with the infrastructure within that. I think there's some problems over at Harbor House. Arguably, you were one of the few administrations I've seen that actually took a action that I thought was not received well, but I thought was a smart move, which was the inspections. And I think there was mixed feelings on that. What do you see the future of public housing being in Annapolis?
Sure, that's a great question. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because it's one of the biggest legacies I want to leave behind, which is how we address the issue of the housing authority, and most importantly, the residents that live there. So before I came into office, the basic model was, look, this is the federal government's property, don't worry about it, don't get involved.
So essentially the federal government was the owner and the city was the superintendent.
But basically, that's not leadership. You can't look at a group of your population just because they're poor and say, well, I'm not going to get involved and I don't care about their quality of life, right? So my transition team said we needed to inspect all the units, and we did that. And there was a lot of pushback and fear originally. People said, the mayor's coming in, he's going to shut down public housing, he's going to kick everyone out.
They were saying that.
Yeah. And you know what?
Privatization is something that a lot of the residents live in fear of.
Sure. But if you look at the inspections, because I went door to door and talked with people, not a single person was kicked out. And we've had hundreds of things fixed. Everything from a shower's leaking, they have something wrong with the fire code. We've had hundreds of things happen where we fixed it up and protected people's quality of life and made it better. But what I've done is I was the first mayor to go to D.C. and demand more. I have regular meetings with the Housing Authority Board. I've appointed, I think if you look back, maybe the best board for the Housing Authority ever. If you look at the qualifications and what people bring to that board, and we've changed the way things have happened in the Housing Authority. We've reached out and said, look, people need internet, the digital divide. And the first place in the state of Maryland, Comcast is offering free and reduced internet for everyone. They did it just for kids in Title I schools before. So it's $9.99. You can get internet. We built them a new basketball court at Newtown 20. We forgave the inspection fees the first years. I got a passion for this. When I went by, I had people come to my open door and saw the conditions they lived in. I said, I can't be a mayor that doesn't represent everyone. And we've done that, and we've made steps in the right direction. Do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. I think the first thing you have to do is figure out where you are. I've got them to do new audits, and it showed that they spent $3 million the wrong way, and the federal government's coming in. But I think we can keep working harder, and I think we have to do a better job lobbying our state and federal officials for more help. You got to give these people jobs and a chance of opportunity going forward. And one of the things we've done to reach out to is I get a column in the newsletter. So I said, listen, when I have a job fair, I always let them know. We had one for Maryland Live. We had 150 people, I think, come up. They hired 20 people on the spot. We're doing a job fair for the energy park. We're also doing a job fair for a second chance program. I'm fortunate enough to be appointed by the governor to serve on his workforce development board, mostly on the cybersecurity side. But what about people that have a prior record? How do we help them? So the city's starting back a program that I initiated, which is a second chance program. So they take a job in public works and they have 2 positions. People come in for 6 months at a time, right? Working on it. It happened probably 3-4 administrations ago. They work for 6 months, then they have job history, pay, references, they go on to another job. So the city's taking the lead, and there's a lot of businesses that do this too, and they're some of our best workers. So my thing is we got to find a way to help people connect to jobs, because there was talking to this guy who was a diesel mechanic for the big trucks, and he's making like $75,000 a year. The cybersecurity, I tell people all the time, if you have a security clearance and a computer science degree, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you make $100,000, most likely in your 30s. Mm-hmm. So if you show kids, hey, drug dealing is a minimum wage job, usually at best, but here's all these other career paths, which, by the way, they're dying for people. I think the NSA has like 3,000 jobs they're looking for. Some of these mechanics and other stuff, they got hundreds of jobs they can't fill. Here's a path you can take to make $50,000 your first year out as a truck driver with a high school degree. So the city has to do more to encourage people. And also showing up. A big part of being mayor is going out there talking to people, knocking on their door, going to community events. And I think that's one of the things I've done well, is really getting out there. I'm in a different church almost every Sunday now. I go to a lot. You got
me beat.
It's good though. I
don't even make one.
It is fascinating to meet different people. I mean, this job as mayor, people say, why do you love it? And more than the politics of, not raising taxes. You get to meet so many people, and you get to go places I never would have been to. I've walked in neighborhoods, met people, if I wasn't mayor, I never would have met. And it's such an amazing town. It's such not just diverse in terms of age, sex, color, and all that, but in terms of people's thoughts and their ideas. That's where a lot of my good ones come from, is from people just talking with me.
In that diversity, we talked about the Latino community, which has seemingly exploded out of nowhere, which in fact it really hasn't. It's built probably over the last 10, 15 years slowly, but now you see so many, especially on Forest Drive and Old Forest Drive and Chinquapin, you're seeing an explosion of Latino businesses, restaurants and car repair, and of course landscaping companies. They're not just working for these landscaping companies, they're owning these landscaping companies. My kids go to school with Latinos who are the second generation now. What does the city do to absorb them into the fabric of the city so that they're not living separately than the rest of us? I know the police department does a great job with their translator, and they're very aware of the special needs that come with that community. I think we had a liaison at one point. We're looking for another one, I believe. But what do we do to absorb that community and embrace what they bring to the table for Annapolis?
Yeah, I think communication is the most important thing you can do, which is reaching out and having that dialogue. So the first thing is the city's transferred a number of documents into Spanish. Our website's now in Spanish. All the bus routes are in Spanish. There's a number of other things that are now in different languages for people to understand. In addition to that, the council, we did hire an African-American and Hispanic liaison, but I also had an Hispanic liaison before the council passed the resolution for it. And it was great because we would talk to churches, talk to business leaders. I was at St. John Newman the other day for a soccer tournament, just meeting with people, talking with them, making them feel welcome. People are like, oh, we met the mayor. Because a lot of these people come from countries, and ironically, most of them aren't from Mexico, although that's all you hear. They're from El Salvador, Guatemala. Yeah, sure, that's the predominant. And they come from countries where a lot of people don't vote, because if you vote the wrong way, there's dire consequences sometimes. So letting them know, hey, I'm your mayor, I'm here to help. So I think communication is a big key, tying them in with jobs, and then just showing up. Half the job is showing up. It's being out of the office. I talk to people all the time, and I said, you can't be the man of the high castle that sits behind your desk all day. If you do that, you're never going to be a good mayor.
What's your favorite Latin restaurant in town?
My Latin restaurant. I like Caliente Grill a lot.
Caliente's
I think that's really good. I like Sin Fronteras, even though Walter gives me a hard time. He does have great food.
Walter gives everyone a hard time.
He does. He's a great
guy.
He is a great guy. He's a great guy.
Great ceviche.
There's a lot of good. There's a lot of good places.
There's a lot of phenomenal places. You know,
yeah.
The difference between the Mexican cuisine and the Salvadorian is the Salvadorian doesn't like spice. So that's where. So if they're adding the spice, it's because they're trying to attract the gringos. So that's ironic that they're making it spicier.
Yeah.
But the food scene is getting really good. I love. We talked about in the food episode we did a couple weeks ago. I love El Cabrito right there across from Clock Tower. That place is amazing.
I was talking. I actually got to reach out. The guy in the Washington Post, one of the food critics, did a thing, and he said Annapolis isn't really a foodie town. And I was going to invite him after the election and challenge him on that because I think there's better food here in Annapolis, and I mean this than almost anywhere else. So you take any steak place in D.C., put it up against Lunis's. Take someone to Carol's Creek or Cafe
Lunis
Normandy.
is my favorite place in the world.
Yeah, I guarantee you people will like it better.
And we were at Vin 909 the other night, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
We got some great places here. We got some authentic places too.
Sure.
I mean, you look at these dives like El Cabrito and stuff like that, and you're getting proper street food that you would get in southern Mexico. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Last question. What was your best day as mayor, and what was your worst?
Let me think about. Let me do the worst day first. I'm trying to think about. There's been a lot of council meetings where we've gone really late. We weren't sure how things were going to go. Probably one of the hardest days when we had the Baltimore riots. And I remember I was sitting up there at council, and I get a text from the police chief. And he's like, hey, I really need to talk to you. And so I get up, I leave, and I grab the city manager outside. And he's like, this is happening in Baltimore, could spread here, and they've asked for our help. He's like, we want to send some people up there. And I'm like, well, what are your thoughts? What do the police want to do? He's like, they really want to help their brothers in blue. He's like, it's going to be dangerous. We need the okay from you. And so he was on board, the police officers were on board, and we sent him up there. But that was a challenge because it was the first time I really had to send people into harm's way. They wanted to go, and that was
that's going to freak you out. I mean,
it does. I mean, God forbid something happens. People got injured up there, but it was leadership. It's something we had to do, and they said, look, we would want them to come for us. So that was probably the most challenging day as mayor. The best day as mayor, I don't know. There's a lot of them. I feel like every time the budget gets passed, I can finally sleep and get a little time off. So that's always good. And then probably the energy park too, getting that kicked off and underway. I think that's going to be a big legacy for the city.
All right, so you're ready for the campaign. This is where it's going to just really kick in next couple weeks.
Yeah, someone told me that. I've been kicked in for a while. I mean, raising money, knocking on doors, and I think we're doing really well. And I wish we would do more debates. That's the one thing that was different from this and the other ones. And I appreciate you and John doing the forum because we've only had 2 so far, and I think there's the League of Women Voters in Eastport, and that's it. Where last election, we must have had at least 10.
Yeah, we're going to have another one after the primary, where we're going to have one there. And there's going to be arm wrestling, and there's going to be a dart contest. So we're going to mix it up. It's going to be good.
What was that thing in old school where, do you remember they're going to get kicked off?
That's right.
Like the ribbon dancing. We should do that, like a decathlon of events to see who can win.
I love that when you jump through the hoop of fire. Oh, the hoop of fire, we're going to totally do that.
I like that.
Yeah, you're tall, so you're going to have a little bit of a problem get your whole body through. So just tuck your arms in, that's my guess. So, Mr. Mayor, hey, thanks for coming in. We really appreciate you being candid and making yourself available, and good luck with the election.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Tim.
All right, thanks.
And that was Mayor Michael Pantelides.
And me. So it was interesting for a couple reasons. First of all, we talked a little bit about the campaign finance report, which came out last week. So when you hear this, it'll probably be 2 weeks.
Sure.
And for all political wonks and junkies in town, everyone just falls upon that and tears through it. And he's got a lot of money. Mayor Pantelides, as does John Astle. So there's a ton of money at play. You've seen all the Facebook ads. They've been everywhere. Everyone's got their videos.
I bet he's got a lot of money in case he loses this race to run for delegate.
Can you do that?
I don't know. I think they can.
Or do you have to
I
turn
think
it
they
over?
can filter. He's got to return it back to the
Central Committee and they reassign it.
And I think they can probably figure out a way to get that out.
So, and we mentioned it too, that there's a lot of power that comes with being an incumbent, and there's a lot of liability that comes with being an incumbent, because you have a record that people can strain through and pick at and leverage to your advantage, to their advantage. Some things that are beyond your control, some things that aren't. So I think that in the upcoming debate, which we'll talk about in a minute, I think that the current mayor is going to be a little bit on the defensive. I mean, I think that there's been no major gaffes, but you heard him there that he was very adamant about his opposition to Crystal Spring or to Village of Providence Point. Yeah, and they'd sent the latest plans over, which promptly got rejected and sent back for the 5th, 6th, 7th time.
Sure.
So we're going to see if there's any litigation there, or if they're going to. It's nothing's going to happen until after the election at this rate. So there's a lot going on, and Market House. By the time you hear this, something may or may not have happened on the Market House front. But I think it was a good talk with the mayor, but he's going to probably have to be on his guard in these debates, because he's got a body of work from which he can draw.
Well, speaking of debates, what we are doing is we are planning the debate again, as we did in June with the mayoral forum. But this
was fun.
This will be a more debate. How would you know? You didn't have anything to do with planning it.
No, I didn't. I didn't say the planning was fun.
You just got your little
just
Italian
showing up
suit
that's the fun part.
But we are planning another. This will be a mayoral debate.
Yep.
It will not be a forum. We will have hard questions. We will have the rebuttals and mud and everything else for them to fling at each other. On the 2 surviving candidates, it'll be in October at some point. More likely than not, it will be at Ram's Head on stage again, where we will have booze and food.
Oh, I love booze,
which was really good. So just keep your ears perked for that.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be coming up soon.
So John's job is to plan that out, and my job is to send him texts every couple of days going, "How's it going?" That's pretty much how we work. That's how it works. Yeah, it's a system.
Yeah.
So we also have a system with our social media. That means that you can follow us on Facebook. We have a group and we have a page. So find us on both. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Leave us a review. Leave us, just a few stars, 10, 12 stars, whatever fits there. The reviews and the stars do help us with the algorithms, so that when people are searching for podcasts, they pull it up. So those are very important. We appreciate all the reviews and nice little stars that people have left for us so far. You can find us on Twitter at MD Krabs Podcast. You can find John at Annapolis. I'm at Tim Hamilton 47.
Hey, can I throw a quick...
And YouTube. You're at YouTube.
Yep, we're on YouTube. But can I throw a quick plug in? I just launched a daily news brief with Annapolis. Just launched September 1st.
He is such a busy man.
So if you want to check that out, it's a quick 10-minute local news. It's all local weather, local sports, everything else. Check that out. You can search wherever you go.
It's like the news brief that you have with Alexa, but it's going to be specific to Annapolis.
Yep.
And so if you want to get your just 10-minute shot of news, that's for here local, like they found a body the other day in Quiet Waters. And so
it's it's a work in progress. We're working on some little bumps and whatnot, but it's check it out.
I helped him pick out the music.
No, you didn't.
This has been the Maryland Krabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandkrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You still here? It's over. Go home. Go.